Gaur Premanandi Hayaribo Jayom Vishnupad Paramahangsa Padavrajak Acharya Satarsa Sri Shivan ISKCON BBT Founder Acharya Divine Grace AC Bhaktivedanta Swami Maharaj Prabhupada Ki Jai Granthara Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Sri Sri Guru and Gauranga. Glory to Srila Prabhupada. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Deving Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayam Mutirayat. Before reciting the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is our means of conquest, let us offer respectful obeisances unto the personality of God and Lord Narayan, unto Narayan Rishi, the supremest human being, unto Mother Saraswati, the goddess of learning, unto Srila Vyasadeva, the author, and unto Srila Prabhupada, who is the translator, commentator, and our spiritual master. Nashta Prayeshu Bhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naistiki. By regularly attending the Srimad Bhagavatam class and by rendering service unto the pure devotee, all that is troublesome to the heart is almost completely destroyed, and loving devotional service unto the personality of Godhead, who is worshipped with transcendental songs, becomes established as an irrevocable fact. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So we're continuing our reading from the second canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam. This is chapter 10. Srimad Bhagavatam is the answer to all questions. We're going to do 2 verses. 11 has no purport, so I'll do that by myself, and then we'll do 12 responsively. Today is also Ramachandra Vijayotsava, so we'll say a few words about Lord Ram. And it's also the appearance of Madhvacharya, so we'll say a few things about Madhvacharya. Just a little something. We should always remember these great souls on their appearance and disappearance days. So, text number 11. Tas vavatsit shishtasu sahasrang parivatsaran tena narayano nama yad apak purushod bhavaha. Translation: the Supreme Person is not impersonal and therefore is distinctly a Nara, or person. Therefore, the transcendental water created from the Supreme Nara is known as Nara. And because he lies down on that water, he's known as Narayana. So, many times we've brought up this pronunciation business. Today, as you can see, it's extremely important. There's Nara, Nara, and Narayana. Many people say Narayan. It's not Narayan. It's Narayana. Everybody say Narayana. Okay. So, the next verse. Dravyam Karma. Oh, did I read the translation? Yes. Yeah, I did. Okay. Dravyam Karma Cha Kalash Cha Swabhavo Jiva Eva Cha Yad Anugrahataha Santi Na Santi Yad Upekshaya Dravyam Karma Chakalascha Swabhavo Jiva Eva Cha Yad Anugrahatak Santi Nasanti Yad Upekshaya Dravyam Karma Chakalascha Swabhavo Jiva Eva Cha Yad Anugrahatak Santi Nasanti Yad Upekshaya Dravyam Karma Chakalascha Swabhavo Jiva Eva Cha Yad anugrahatak santi nasanti yad upekshaya. Please chant. Ladies? Okay, synonyms, dravyam, physical elements, karma, action, cha, and kalaha, time, cha, also, swabhavak jivaha, the living entities, eva, certainly, cha, also, yat, whose, anugrataha, by the mercy of, santi, exists, na, does not, santi, exist, yat upekshaya, by negligence. Srila Prabhupada's translation for this verse. One should definitely know that all material ingredients, activities, time, and modes, and the living entities who are meant to enjoy them all, exist by His mercy only. And as soon as He does not care for them, everything becomes non-existent. Please repeat. One should definitely know that all material ingredients, activities, time, and modes, and the living entities who are meant to enjoy them all, exist by His mercy only. And as soon as He does not care for them, everything becomes non-existent. Srila Prabhupada's purport. The living entities are the enjoyers of the material ingredients, time, modes, and so on, because they want to lord it over the material nature. The Lord is the supreme enjoyer, and the living entities are meant to assist the Lord in His enjoyment, and thus participate in the transcendental enjoyment of everyone. The enjoyer and the enjoyed both participate in enjoyment, but deluded by the illusory energy, the living entities want to become the enjoyer like the Lord, although they are not meant for such enjoyment. The jivas, the living entities, are mentioned in the Bhagavad Gita as the Lord's superior nature or paraprakriti, and so also it is mentioned in the Vishnu Purana. Therefore, the living entities are never the Purushas or the factual enjoyers. As such, the spirit of enjoyment by the living entity in the material world is false. In the spiritual world, the living entities are pure in nature, and therefore they are associates in the enjoyment of the Supreme Lord. In the material world, the spirit of enjoyment of the living entities by dint of their own actions, karma, gradually fades by the laws of nature, and thus the illusory energy dictates in the ears of the conditioned souls that they should become one with the Lord. This is the last snare of the illusory energy. When the last illusion is also cleared off by the mercy of the Lord, the living entity again becomes reinstated in his original position and thus becomes actually liberated. Very important word there, reinstated. Prabhupada makes it clear as what he's presenting on this point, but some or other it's still cloudy for some people. I'll read that again. When the last illusion is also cleared off by the mercy of the Lord, the living entity again becomes reinstated in his original position and thus becomes actually liberated. For this attainment of liberation from the material clutches, the Lord creates the material world, maintains it for some time, 1,000 years of his measurement, as stated in the previous verse, and then again annihilates it by his will. The living entities are therefore completely dependent on the mercy of the Lord, and all their so-called enjoyments by scientific improvement are crushed into dust when the Lord desires. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swami Nityanamane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pacharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschachadeshtarine Om Jnana Timarandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshur Unmilitam Jaina Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtang Shapitang Jaina Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Tadati Sapagantikam Vandehang Shri Guru Shri Tapadakamalam Shri Gurun Vaisavangscha Shri Rupam Sagadatam Sahagana Raghunatham Batam Tang Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Purjana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shiva Shakan Batangsha Hey Krishna Karana Sindhu Dina Bando Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namosate Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vishnavanu Sute Devi Pranamami Haripriye Vancha Kalpaturibhya Kripa Sindhu Bevacha Patitanang Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasari Gaurabhaktarinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So for our benefit, since time immemorial, intelligent, compassionate, pure devotees of the Lord ask questions that it may seem surprising that they are asking, because it seems very basic. If they know the Lord and they're already surrendered to the Lord, why they ask such basic questions? They ask for our benefit. They ask for our benefit, which gives the Lord, directly or indirectly, a chance to enlighten us. In the case of Arjuna, Arjuna asked questions directly of the Supreme Lord Krishna, and he answered them, again, for our benefit. But here in the Bhagavatam, at least in this particular pastime, the questions are being asked by Maharaj Parikshit and Shukadev Goswami, who is the Lord's representative, by dint of disciplic succession, is giving his answers. In the purport, Lord Srila Prabhupada references, you could say almost say paraphrases, verses from the 7th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, which is entitled, who knows, what's the title of the 7th chapter? Is it? Anybody else? Everybody agree with Brigapati? Is it knowledge of the Absolute? Okay. So in the 7th chapter, Krishna is explaining more or less what Prabhupada is explaining here in this purport. He states in the 4th verse, Bhumira Ponalo Vayu, Kangmano Buddha Evacha, Ahankar Ityam, Bina Prakriti Ashada. He says that these 8 energies that I'm listing here, these are my separated material energies. Separated doesn't mean that it has nothing to do with the Lord. Everything is related to the Lord. He himself says that ahang sarvasya prabhu matak sarvam pravartate. Everything is emanating from me. So one who's in Krishna consciousness, Prabhupada said many, many times, sees Krishna everywhere, because you see the Lord in his energies. An example used is like a parent, particularly the mother, mostly. Even after the child has grown up and left home, if she happens to see that baby booty that he used to wear or she used to wear when she was a toddler, immediately the mother's heart, melts and thinks of the child and like that. So everything that's in relation to that offspring of hers reminds her of that offspring, natural. So similarly, if we understand that everything is emanating from Krishna, then whatever we see, we relate to Krishna and we think of Krishna. And Krishna himself says that in many places, that you should always think of me. One who sees me everywhere and sees everything in me, for that person I'm never lost and that person is never lost to me. So this is the whole idea of Bhakti Yoga, is to see Krishna in everything and everywhere and in everyone. Krishna says, Vedaham samatitani bhartamani tavarjuna bhavishyami sabhutani mam tu vedana kashana. Says, I know everything, past, present, and future, and I also know everyone. And this is particularly important when we go out preaching, whether it's book distribution or, in my case, for the first time in a long time, we have an in-person presentation at a high school downtown. So, but whenever we meet anyone, anywhere, whether it's on book distribution or we're talking to a class or just meet somebody on the street, we should immediately know, I may not know anything about this person, but Krishna knows everything about that person. So that immediately reduces any reticence, any fear that we may have. Krishna knows this person extremely well, better than they know themselves. And he's in control of the situation. He's in control of the situation. So if we simply remain Krishna conscious and leave the results of the interaction up to Krishna, then we're doing our duty. Our duty is to help people come to this point of understanding, of assimilating this knowledge that we're assimilating, that Krishna is the supreme, the source of everything and everyone, and the controller of everything and everyone. And if we surrender to him, then we can again be reinstated in our original position of pure service to the Lord and therefore pure enjoyment. We are secondary enjoyers. We're secondary in everything. Just like we learned, learned in the beginning of this chapter, that verse that the brahmachari should all know by heart. And I always reserve the right to test you at any moment. 10 subjects of the Srimad Bhagavatam. Whenever we go to colleges, high schools, we always present the 5 subjects of the Bhagavad Gita, because it gives them something to concentrate on. Not just here's a Gita and start reciting verses. No, this Bhagavad Gita is going to give you knowledge of these 5 subjects. What are those 5 subjects? Yes. What is the first one? Jiva is one, yes. But what comes first above everything? Ishvara, yes. The Supreme Lord, the Supreme Controller. So Ishvara first, then Jiva. Somebody said Jiva. Then Prakriti. Somebody else? Kala. And the 5th one? Karma. Right. So karma is also mentioned in today's purport. By our karma, our free will, we engage in activities in this material world that turn us away from Krishna and put us on the slippery slope of birth, death, old age, and disease. And the very last snare of that slippery slope, as Prabhupada mentioned, is the material energy whispering in our ear, you can become one with the Supreme. And many people think that's a good proposition. Yeah, I can become one with the Supreme. So Prabhupada said that's the last snare. Now by the mercy of Krishna, when we get over that last snare, then we become, again, using that word, reinstated in our original position. Extremely important. Prabhupada over and over and over drills in this idea, going back to home, back to God, and being reinstated in your original position. I don't know where people get this idea from that we've never been in the spiritual world. We've always been in the material world. Because they misunderstand this phrase, Nitya Bhada. Although Prabhupada says Nitya in that context means since time immemorial. You can't trace out the beginning, but there was a beginning. See? You can't trace it out. We've been here so long. So long. And that happens even in our material experience. Sometimes you've been in a place so long, you may not remember exactly when you got here. Like this morning I asked Radha Mai, how long have you been here in New Dwarka? I was thinking about, maybe 12, 14 years. She said, no, 18 years. And every one of us, many of us here have been here for a long time. We may not remember exactly when we came here. Some people have that kind of memory. They know, they can tell you, I came here, August 12th, 1973 or something like that. But not everybody has that kind of memory. Some people, they have to really scratch their heads to remember, when did I first come to New Dwarka? And we're just talking here in the matter of decades. So can you imagine when we're talking lifetimes? It's not possible to remember. Kalpas, creation after creation. It goes way, 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 way back. So Nitya Bhada doesn't mean that you've always been in the material world. It just means you've been here so long you can't remember. For sure, you can't remember when you came here. But there was a beginning, Prabhupada said. Anadi Karama Pale, as Bhaktivinoda Thakur thinks, since time immemorial, Anadi. So long ago, you can't remember, there was a beginning. A point at which we came from the spiritual world, came into the material world, and if we follow this Krishna conscious program, we can be reinstated in our original position. We don't ever actually lose that, because you can't lose something that's intrinsic, your nature, your dharma. It can be covered over, and the dharma of the living entity is to serve, to render service. But not just grudgingly render service. Somebody tells you to sweep the temple room, all right, you get a broom, you sweep it. Somebody says, this is a preaching movement, you have to go out at least on Harinam. Okay, I go out on Harinam. Not like that. It should be done with love. And that love naturally develops as we associate more and more with Krishna and Krishna's pure representatives. Because by such association, the cleansing of the consciousness takes place. And as we become more and more cleansed in the heart and the consciousness, then our original natural love for Krishna comes out. So here it's being mentioned, again, Prabhupada's mentioning those two verses from the 7th chapter. 4th verse we mentioned, and the 5th verse. Aparamatas swanyam vidi prakriti mehing param. Jiva bhuta mahabaho yedam dharyate jagat. That above these 8 material elements that are mentioned in the 4th verse, there is a superior energy of mind. That is all of us. Superior not in the sense of that we can dominate it, because that's our folly. We try to dominate the material energy to squeeze some pleasure out of it. But we can't. We can't. We are so minute that we become overpowered by the material energy. As a child, I was taught the truism that water and fire make good servants but bad masters. In other words, don't get in over your head. Don't play with fire to the point where you get consumed, which many people do. A lot of these fires here in Southern California, well, not just Southern, all over California, quite a few of them are intentionally set. People are so foolish. They go into the forest and they're so ignorant and foolish and purposefully, malicious. They light a fire, and then quite often they themselves get caught in it. They can't get out because it spreads so quickly. Because of lack of rain, the things just burn very quickly and very ferociously. A lot more so than it did 30, 40, 50 years ago. There's always been wildfires everywhere, all around the world. It's just part of being in the material world. But when people are more and more impious, you get less and less rain, and therefore the vegetation becomes so dry that it goes up instantly, like that. So you may think, I'm going to set a fire and then I'm going to get in my car and drive down this country road. By the time you get to the fire can outrun you. It happens quite often. People have to literally drive through a wall of fire to get out of someplace. So water and fire, 2 of the 5 Mahabhutas, main material elements, may make good servants. In other words, you can use fire to cook and to heat your space and stuff like that. But if you let it get to the point where it's so big it becomes your master, you're finished. Same thing with water. You can use water for cooking, for drinking, for cleaning. But if you get in over your head, in an instant you can drown. Like right along this coast here, quite often there are very, very strong riptides. And even very strong swimmers get pulled out to sea. So, in other words, don't fool around with Krishna's material energy. Trying to control it and trying to, as Prabhupada says, at the end of the purport, they get crushed The so-called scientists and enjoyers in this material world, they literally get crushed, ground into dust by the Lord's material energy that they're trying to squeeze happiness out of. We can't. We can't. Everything we do turns into failure. Prime example I like to use, because students can relate to it, everybody can relate. Most of us have a car, or would like to have a car, or had a car. We can relate to the automobile. So what is it in the beginning stage? What is it? It's just an ore in the ground. If you came across a vein of iron ore, you might not even recognize it. But those who are geologists, metallurgists, they recognize, oh, here's iron ore. And they create a mine, they dig out this iron ore, and they smelt it into a metal, iron. Now, iron by itself, it rusts quite easily, it oxidizes. So they come up with this bright idea of adding some other ingredients in there to make it into steel. Steel is nothing but iron with some other ingredients so it doesn't rust so easily. So they create steel. Nobody's, if you saw a roll of steel in a shop, it doesn't excite you. But you take that roll of steel and you turn it into a car, now it looks interesting. If it's a Corolla, you're not so excited. I've told this story before, it's a true story. When I was in Potomac Temple for a few years, got to know quite a few of the members there, quite intimately. So one of them was very upset one day, visibly upset. So I asked him, what's wrong? Tell me what's wrong. Oh, my son, his eldest son, just graduated high school and was going to college. So he gave him a car to go to college. But what did he give him? He gave him a Corolla. And the boy was mad. How can you give me a Corolla? All my friends are driving Mercedes, BMW. What kind of father are you? So we're not so excited you turn that steel into a Corolla, but you turn it into a Mercedes or a BMW or a Porsche. It's just steel, material elements, material energy. But we're so bewildered. It's the same, even the bodies that we're in. Every single human body is skin, bone, blood, so many things inside that you don't even want to see. But because we are bewildered by the material energy, we see one material body and we think ugly, we don't know. And then another, beautiful, wonderful. It's the same elements. So this Bhagavatam presentation begins on the elemental level to bring us to our senses. That this is what you're dealing with. You're dealing with the Lord's material energy in the form of earth, water, fire, air, ether, and also subtle energy, mind, intelligence, ego. But it belongs to Him, and therefore should be used in His service. And if you allow yourself to be trained in that consciousness, then you actually become happy. Otherwise, you just become mad, literally. Madness is one of the 6 enemies of this soul in the material world. Lust, anger, greed, envy, illusion, and madness. These are the 6 enemies of the conditioned soul. And we become mad. People become mad. They fight each other over trifles. They will kill each other for an iPhone. Which is just, again, a little chunk of metal and plastic. And a couple of 100 years ago, nobody had an iPhone, and people were happy, talking to each other, whatever, communicating. It's not that communication became, was created when Apple became, no. But some other people become so mad to try to enjoy the material energy that they would kill each other over, you hit my car. Just this morning, I looked out, I heard a sound, bang. I looked out. Somebody obviously being impatient because the person in front of them wouldn't pull out onto Venice Boulevard, bang, hit the guy in the back. And it's funny, I'd never seen this man before, but when I came out to go home to get my iPad, I saw him. He looked like a Muslim. He just slowed down in front of the temple. He said, good morning. And I said, Hare Krishna. Nice looking guy. He just drove to the corner, and within a few minutes, bang, somebody hit him. So this is it. We're trying to enjoy the material energy, and it's just one problem after another after another. Either you have an accident, or you have to pay taxes, or your significant other leaves you, or something is always happening to wake us up. But we're so engrossed in material consciousness that we don't fully wake up. We just brush it off. We think, yeah, I'm having a bad day, but tomorrow will be better. I'll get some more money, and constantly making plans for enjoyment in the material world, and constantly being frustrated. So if we take the time to understand the Lord's presentation, understand our situation, our existential situation, as they say, then we become sober, and we can very soberly go forward in Krishna consciousness and come back to our original position of pure service to the Lord and be fully happy. So if there's any question, one or two questions, I want to just leave a little time to read something about Lord Ram and then say something about Madhvacharya. Yes.
That, you know, we didn't originally come from the spiritual world, but I do, because I hear him say it. They quote Jiva Goswami, Bhaktivinoda Thakur, among other names. So how do we deal with that? They claim that there's statements from previous acharyas to the effect that we don't originally start in the spiritual
Then you're going
world.
over the head of your spiritual master, and Prabhupada warned us, don't do that. He is distilled all of that Vedic knowledge, just like the Goswamis, Nana, Shastra, Vacharana, Kanipa. No, they're famous for distilling all of the Vedic knowledge for the benefit of all human beings. So they've done that, and he's further taken that. That means includes Jiva Goswami and all this, those who came after him. Prabhupada sat down with all of those translations, all of those commentaries, and gave us his Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam, etc. So whatever is in those books, that's what we go by. Why stop at Jiva Goswami? Why don't you go back to Lord Chaitanya and to Krishna and hear what they said? Krishna says, you're my part and parcel eternally. Where does Krishna say in the Bhagavad Gita that you appeared in the material world, not in the spiritual world? Where? Can anybody quote a verse from the Gita that says that? So our point is, don't jump over Prabhupada's head. Prabhupada has drilled in this idea. You came from the spiritual world. Go back to home, back to God, and don't stay here. He just said in today's purport, you'll be reinstated in your original position. Extremely clear knowledge, presentation. Those who claim that you didn't, they have to then come up with some idea of why Prabhupada said that. Oh, he didn't want to blow your mind or something like that. That is speculation. Prabhupada always said, everything I have to tell you I've left in my books. It's quite clear. Everything is there. So if you have to interpret what Prabhupada said to find some other conclusion, then you're going down the wrong path. Because he himself clearly said, what's in my books is what I want you to learn. If you have to jump over Prabhupada to go to somebody else to make a point, you're forget it. I'm not going with you. I take what's in Prabhupada's books and what he stated over and over in classes. Not just in his books. He also gave the same presentation in his classes and personal talks with people. You came from the spiritual world. Go back to home, back to Godhead. Okay?
Yep.
All right. So I just wanted to read two nice verses from the 9th canto, the 10th chapter of the 9th canto, regarding Lord Ram. Since it's Ramachandra Vijayotsava. So this is the 10th chapter, verse of the 9th canto, verse 22. Ramastamaha Purushada Purishayana Kanta Samaksham Asata Paritasapate Takta Chapasya Palamadya Jugupsitasya Yachami Kala Eva Kartu Langya Viryaha. This is Lord Ramachandra. He said, Lord Ramachandra said to Ravana, you are the most abominable of the man-eaters. Indeed, you are like their stool. You resemble a dog, for as a dog steals eatables from the kitchen in my absence, in the absence of the householder, in my absence you kidnap my wife Sita Devi. Therefore, as Yamaraj punishes sinful men, I shall also punish you. You are most abominable, sinful, and shameless. Today, therefore, I, whose attempt never fails, shall punish you. And then the next verse, Evam Shipandanu Shisanditam Utsasarja Panam Sabadram Mivatadridyamak Pibeda Sasrigvamandashamokarnya Patad Vimanad Daheti Jalpatijane Sukriti Voriktaha. Translation, after thus rebuking Ravana, Lord Ramachandra fixed an arrow to his bow, aimed at Ravana, and released the arrow which pierced Ravana's heart like a thunderbolt. Upon seeing this, Ravana's followers raised a tumultuous sound, crying, alas, alas, what has happened? What has happened? As Ravana, vomiting blood from his 10 mouths, fell from his airplane, just as a pious man falls to earth, from the heavenly planets when the results of his pious activities are exhausted. Lord Ramachandra Ki Jai. And then there's not much time, but most of you know anyway that Madhvacharya is precursor in our line, the Brahma Madhva Gaudiya Sampradaya. So his teachings are very relevant and very important. He was said to be an incarnation of Vayu. He was extremely strong physically. Once some puffed up guy challenged him to a test of strength, and he said quite nonchalantly, "I'll plant my big toe on the ground. If you can separate my foot from the ground, then okay, you'll be declared stronger." And the so-called strong man could not do that. Can you imagine if somebody just puts their toe on the ground? It shouldn't be too difficult to just pick up that foot, but he couldn't do it. That's how strong Madhvacharya was. And there are many, many other stories about him. But the point is, again, main point is that he's in our line. He's one of the precursors in our line. It traces back through Madhavendra Puri all the way back to Madhvacharya, all the way back to Krishna himself. So that's our line, and we are very fortunate that we're hearing from the representative of Madhvacharya, Srila Prabhupada. And again, Prabhupada's presentation is exceedingly clear, and there's really not much to debate about in what Prabhupada said, because he was extremely consistent in his presentation. It's not that Prabhupada said one thing in one place and something else in a different place, and we gave one class here and a different class there, he said something. No, Prabhupada's presentation was extremely consistent, especially on these important points, like the Jiva, the situation of the Jiva. He consistently said, you came from the spiritual world, go back to home, go back to Krishna, be reinstated in the original position. So I, for one, don't see any room for debate. I'm sure there are many out there I'll get a lot of emails by the time I get home. I'll get a lot of messages on Facebook. But for myself, I can only speak for myself. For me, it's exceedingly clear, because Prabhupada said that. And even in presenting translations of songs like Bhaktivinoda Thakur's song, Anadi Karamapala, it says Anadi means so long ago that you can't trace it out. Not that you've been here forever. No. There was a beginning, but it was so long ago that you can't trace it out. Grantara Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai, Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai.